Welcome back to Tides. Today we are diving into what I'm calling the great people strategy reset. For decades, people strategy has meant talent, culture, and performance. But with AI changing the way we work, the way we lead, and even the way we learn, the playbook is shifting. And today I'm joined by Rachel Platt, a people and culture strategist who has been at the front lines of this shift. Together, we will explore what it means to build people strategy in the age of AI, the risks, the opportunities, and how leaders can reset without losing the human core of their organization. Rachel, welcome to Tides.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be with you today.
Likewise, I'm excited to explore this particular conversation with you. Maybe we can start with what does the great people strategy reset mean to you?
So maybe we should even take one step a little bit further back, which is what does people strategy really mean? Because so many leaders, they really think in terms of HR, their HR strategy, which is such a critical and important component. But people strategy and how it differentiates is a little bit more of the holistic approach. It's how you are aligning your talent with your business strategy, not for compliance purposes, but because your people are your strategic driver. That is so critical to have at the center of how you are planning what it takes to attract the right type of talent, how you grow that talent into future leaders, how you set expectations, how you assess that talent, all of those components, and of course, how you retain them for the long term. All of those components is really what people strategy is all about. And now that we're weaving in technology at every turn, which by the way, we have been doing for decades and decades and decades and decades, AI can just accelerate that work. AI really has a lot of people nervous because they are, and if you think back, I mean, I don't want to date myself too much, but if you really think back when everyone was talking about, oh, the internet, oh, cell phones, all of these different components that have had tremendous impact and huge changes. I mean, we've had more change in the last 100 years than they say. I think the stat that I saw was then we've seen actually in more than close to 5,000 years. The core is still, though, remembering that your strategy starts with people, not processes. You are people serving other people who have a goal. And if you keep that in mind, and that AI is really just the accelerator of it, that's what we're all trying to figure out right now is what does that mean? How do we adapt to that? And how do we teach people to work through that journey of change?
Yeah, I completely hear you about the changes that we as humanity has witnessed over last few hundred years. And especially when, like we moved from paper to the internet and so on. But this time around, Rachel, this technology shift feels different in many ways because if we look at past technology changes that have hit us, and I'm going to use our common friend Michelle's analogy, which was so brilliant when she said that previous transformations, we still had an end state defined. So it was like putting a prefabricated home in a piece of land. We knew what we were putting in. This time around, even though AI is technology, but it is also our collective intelligence. It's not like static technology where we know exactly what the nuts and bolts are and how it's going to come together as a house. So we are engaging with an intelligence. This intelligence has that power to shift the way we work, the way organizations are designed. In this particular context, where we know that the end state of this change is not defined yet, and we have to continuously transform ourselves as we integrate, adopt, and adapt with this new intelligence, how does the new people strategy look like? Like, does the old like, I wouldn't even say definition, but the way we were thinking about people's strategy 5 to 10 years ago, does that still apply in this context? Or how should we be thinking about people's strategy in today's context and what we are witnessing today?
So much of what it's such a good question. And whatever answer I give you right now, I feel like if we talked about this again in 3 months, we may have a different answer in 3 months because so much of what we were doing in the past, pre-pandemic and then during the pandemic, we really were able to see how fragile some of our systems were, what some of our talent shortages were, and how reactive we had become. And that really exposed itself in many ways during the pandemic. And then you come out and our new reality is so much sharper and yet so much more unknown. So where we have employees that they need the skill sets are not about learning a task. It's about learning how to adapt. It's about leaning into curiosity and rethinking not just, as you said earlier, what the end result is, but also how you get there and how you can do that in a way that is both meaningful and purposeful so that the humans that work there feel like what they're doing has a purpose that is moving society forward. So whereby like the yesteryear, if you will, the playbook was so much more linear. Now it's so much more dynamic and it's constantly evolving. And this skill set of how do you ask questions? How do you take immense amounts of data and boil that down into a usable, information that we can make decisions based upon. That's really what we need to be focusing on right now. And yes, things that are within the skill sets of human resources, performance reviews and engagement surveys and leadership retreats, all of those things are still somewhat important, but it makes it very clear that they can't be quite as episodic because the reality is the work that we're doing now is so dynamic and so constant. And so we really need to be thinking and rethinking and planning to rethink again, not 10 years down the road, but 2 months down the road, rethinking, is what we're doing working? Is this because we're going to be constantly learning?
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. So, would you say leadership development and some of the things that you mentioned were the key pillars of a traditional people strategy? Maybe we can highlight for our audience when we talk about people strategy 5 to 10 years ago, what were the key pillars of people strategy? And then we can build from there to ideate collectively on, because to your point, this is such a dynamic space. What could be the future pillars that we should be focusing on when we are thinking about people strategy that gets us builds with where the organization is going?
I think such a huge part, and I'm so curious what you think, but I think such a huge part is what we expect of our leaders and how we think and how they're leading others. So if you think back, I mean, I had a leader who really was very MBO, management by objective, very focused. Everything had to be very focused on that. And pretty much he sat in his office and it was like, didn't talk to anybody, and you didn't come to talk to him unless it was something having to do with a particular goal. There wasn't an exchange of idea. There wasn't authenticity. And frankly, he was kind of like sitting in his ivory tower, like he was the most knowledgeable one in the room. And what we're expecting of our leaders now are for them to be transparent, for them to show vulnerability, for them to actually say, I don't have all of the answers, but let me ask a few more questions. Let me guide you because we don't know. We've got to learn it together. So that ability to guide through ambiguity rather than solely direct and have more of an authoritative management and leadership style. I mean, we're looking for the culture carriers. We're looking for the people who can really motivate people to be curious and motivate people to go beyond what they thought was possible and explore things that maybe have not been done before. And if you can do that, that's where I think the magic is going to come, going forward. And I think so back to your original question about like, what are the core components of people strategy? I think retention is going to come down to where is there this personal slash professional development that helps people to feel that they really can contribute, that they can ask questions, that they can make mistakes, that someone is focused on their development so that they don't fall behind with all of this new technology. I think that is really where the investments need to be made in that learning and development for everyone.
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah. Yeah, I really like both the angles that you highlighted. One is the leadership, and the other is making sure that we bring everybody along, especially if we go back to our framing of what's different in digital transformation this time around. There is no prefabricated
That's
house that
so
we are
true.
building.
Yes.
So if a leader is directing their team for building something which is still ambiguous, uncertain, and they don't know how it's going to shape out, being very rigid and not creating space for experimentation for their people is not going to help them get to that alignment towards the mission of the organization, and which speaks to the kind of decisions that our leaders have to make as we go forward. And I use the example, we've all heard about AI agents. Like, if we have to think so much more broadly when we think about people's strategy this time around, because imagine a scenario where tomorrow you and I are not shopping and we create an agent and we point the agent towards, hey, I need a pair of sneakers. These are the specs. Go buy me the best pair in this budget range. That one shift in consumer behavior has a profound impact on the organization, because now I would say the chief marketing officer or the leader of a marketing team in a company has to realign and redefine the purpose and the value that a marketing team brings to the organization, because you're no longer selling to humans alone. You have to sell to machines and maybe humans. And that again has a ripple effect on your team, the way you structure your team, the skills needed by the team. And this is not an overnight shift, right? It's not like now my team has to look and feel like this, because these changes, like every day you blink, there's a new change that has been thrown into our ecosystem. So, which speaks to the dynamic nature of how leaders need to show up and how we need to upskill our people in this changing landscape. So, our previous people strategy approaches, which were designed for more static way of organizational operation, will not work in this context.
I mean, that workforce planning component is going to change 100 times in the next year, probably, because it's not just about headcount. It's totally about task analysis. What can be automated? Where does the technology exist to be good enough? What really does need human skill? What and who and how to reskill people? If you even think about Chat GPT, like at the basic level, I mean, 6 months ago, Chat GPT was not doing images.
Yeah.
Now it's doing images all day, every day. And so what you might have thought you needed in your marketing department and your designer still requires a human being, but some of the tasks, they really can be thought about in a different way. So that workforce planning is going to be such a change of the building block that AI has brought us. It's going to be major. And one of the other things we're hearing about these really huge organizations, the Fortune 500s, the Fortune 100s, you're not hearing quite as much in the news about the small organizations, but some of my not for profit clients, fewer than 10 people even, they are adopting scheduling bots. They're reinvesting time into staff development. You don't need to be a huge organization to find small ways to incorporate AI. And it's really fascinating. One client truly says, for $20 a month, the price that they pay for just a regular pro account, for $20 a month, less than $500 a year, I have a junior level employee. That's pretty dramatic to rethink. And also, regardless of the size of your organization, if they're saying, oh my goodness, I have a junior level, this is replacing potentially a junior level employee. Well, how do you grow and develop a senior level employee if they've never had the opportunity to learn, expand, experience side by side with other people? I've been talking to my clients, particularly in professional services firms, clients, accounting firms and law firms, an architecture firm that they use, it was definitely more of a pyramid model. And they're having to rethink, wait a minute, we can't just say we're not going to hire at the entry level. We're not going to hire off campus. Well, of course you are, because how are you going to build a future partner? And so just that entire workforce planning, the learning and development, what does training ladder look like? What does a career ladder look like? What skills do we need somebody to have 6 months from now? And what skills will they need to have a year from now and 6 years from now? There is so much interesting work for HR professionals and leaders that AI can augment, but it is going to take the human beings to
Yeah.
make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the things that you highlighted, I'm picking performance as an example. If the workflow changes, if I'm doing my job differently, then how does my learning and development get impacted? You can't measure my performance in the same traditional ways. Anyways, the forced ranking systems of performance management weren't working for us even before AI came into the mix. And what a beautiful opportunity for us to rethink everything that we did from talent practices, people strategy
Yes.
perspective to say, hey, what worked for us in the past? And where did we feel the handcuffs of not being able to do what was right to support our leaders and support our employees in the organization? For one thing, technology no longer is a barrier. If we have to read the new ways HR creates value, we will not be handcuffed by lack of technology or siloed technology or limited technology options that we had in our ecosystem. And I think this brings us to the conversation around, so if we know that old ways of working are not going to work in the modern context, we need to rethink our people strategy. How do we create that? And there's no end state defined. So it's not like we move from doing XYZ to doing ABC now. We'll have to constantly evolve and refine and fine tune our people strategy. So, what would be the building blocks that we should start thinking about? We know the future is fluid and it's ambiguous and it's changing and evolving. So, where should an HR team be thinking about strengthening their core or their foundation or building those building blocks that help them support definition of their people strategy for the future?
I mean, doesn't it come with tech fluency, data literacy?
Yeah.
I have experienced some incredibly talented HR professionals, people and culture professionals, but there is not a huge proportion of them that have the tech fluency. I think we need to have that literacy and courage because I think a lot of that is how are you going to be ethical?
Mm,
Does HR play that role as an ethical guide rail? How do you build trust, fairness into people's strategy when sometimes it can be a little vague? So I think that that's a huge area specifically for HR, their skill foundation, like we talked about with employees, building on comfort with ambiguity, collaboration, even more collaboration across project teams. I mean, those are skills and competencies that, regardless of the technology, will always be critical.
yeah,
And I think the for leaders, regardless of what your area of expertise in, just the exploration mindset. Uh, it was I was laughing with a leader the other day who she wanted to get her whole team Dora the Explorer little hats because like they feel like they're on an expedition. They don't know the answers. And the individuals and the leaders specifically who have that humility, intellectual humility to say, I don't know, let's figure it out. Those people who have that type of coaching skills, they are going to be the ones who are the most successful because whatever playbook you have today, you're going to rewrite and many, many times over. And the playbook of the future does not exist. And the people who tell you they know what it's going to be, they're full of it.
yeah,
I think that we have to be thinking about career paths for all employees, for leaders, for HR. Very much growth will be sideways. Growth will be more project based, more skills driven, not just hierarchical and not just promotion based. It's back to the jungle gym, you know?
absolutely. I really like that you call out two critical ingredients for success for especially for HR professionals and leaders as we build for the future, which is one is courage and second is technical fluency. So important because for whatever said and done, if we look at the legacy of HR and why it exists in an organization, an organization doesn't expect innovation from HR. It was established as a risk mitigation
And
department in the
compliance. Yeah.
organization, right? And we in HR didn't have the experiences and exposures in past digital transformations to speak the language of technology, to understand business in, really intimate ways, like what is the process? How do you map a workflow? How do you implement, let's say, Six Sigma or continuous improvement in the business? We were not engaged in work on the business side in that capacity. So we really need to build the muscle around technical fluency so that we can speak to our partners, the CIO, the COO in their language and build that credibility that we need to bring the human element in this transformation. Because if a CTO or a CEO is looking at solving a business problem from their lens, it is going to be looked at as an engineering only problem.
Right. It's a
People will be
process.
forgotten.
Right.
Yeah, people will be forgotten. But at the same time, the business leaders, the executives in the business might not be waiting for the HR leadership to come to the table with recommendations around people. So I think having that technical fluency and courage to challenge the status quo of how we have been operating in HR will help us build that language, the muscle, so that we can be in that trifecta of technology, the business operations, and us bringing the human element to solve for the transformation for an undefined end state. I love that angle. And the second one that you talked about was the dynamism around my career pathing, learning and development. That's where also we in HR can leverage technology to build a strong data foundation.
Yes.
What's your take on the importance of data, especially people data for an HR strategy team or as we are building people strategy?
I mean, I don't think most organizations actually know what they've got. They don't know the quality.
That's right.
It's it exists in someone's head, maybe it's on a spreadsheet, but there is not usable resource management that happens at scale to say, who are the best people to put on this project? Who will be the most effective, efficient, profitable? And who needs to learn those skills? And how do we give them more opportunities to do so? How do we look at our top performers and ensure that we are investing in them so that we can retain them for the long haul? I think a lot of organizations spend such a significant amount of time on their lower performers, time, energy. And yes, some of those people, I have so many personal success stories of people who really were able to turn it around because we took the time and we invested in them and we communicated better in a way that they could truly understand of what was expected of them. But I think about what would happen if we even took 10% of that time that we're already investing in our lowest performers and instead shifted even more of that to our high performers or our strong performers who could be high performers that we're just not investing as much time in because somebody's screaming about something else.
Yeah.
And what would that do to
Mm.
our ability to retain our talent, to be more profitable, faster to market, better product availability, and better product features to meet whatever your client, your customer is looking for? I think we've got to shift how we're utilizing what data we're asking for, what data we're tracking, and how we're utilizing that data is, to me, really exciting. And then what's also exciting, I mean, the innovative possibilities is certainly exciting, but also the ideas about how do you do that transparently? How do you do that in a way that it's not some other black box that people like employees need to know how decisions are getting made so that there's trust. Um and so what role can and will does HR play in all of that?
Yeah.
And how do you balance it all? I mean, because if you don't have trust with the human beings, like no tool is going to save you. No AI, it's not going to save your organization. But like, how do you balance productivity, people, process, change? I've started thinking about, and this could take us on a totally different tangent, so I'll keep it really short. Like, I'm doing a session with one of my clients coming up about change. And they keep saying, well, we want this to be about change management, about change management. And I finally said to them, like, it was just bugging me. And I finally said to them, it's taken me a long time to say this, but I don't think you can manage change. I think you can plan for the journey of change. I haven't really worked out my whole, analogy yet. I'm sure somebody way smarter than me has done some incredible research on this and I just haven't come across it yet. But you can plan for a journey. You can plan for how you're going to communicate it. You can plan for what you're going to need the people who are impacted to do in the immediate, the short term, the midterm. And then You gotta keep your map by you because you never know where this journey is going to take you. It's not managing it down to the minutia, it's planning, it's the
Yeah.
journey of it.
Absolutely. I love it. And in my words, I would call it enabling change or change enablement. And instead of performance management, it's enabling performance in your
Yes.
organization.
Yes.
And which is also tying it back to our conversation around data. Because if we have a strong layer of data in our organization, by the way, which again was music to my ears when you said it, because we truly don't know much about our people. And I used to wonder, how come we know so much about our customers and not as much about our employees? It's still human beings. One is on that side of the equation, the other is on this side of the equation. And the technology, the infrastructure, everything could be the same. It's not like customers are aliens and employees are humans or vice versa, right? Like it's humans on both sides. So why don't we put in as much energy internally? Just replicate the same technology suite internally, and you will have the rich insights that you need, to your point, to enable performance, to enable career growth and progression, to personalize experiences, to enable and facilitate change, because you will know who's where in the change spectrum, if we take change as an example.
Yes.
And then you target and tailor your change enablement supports to meet the person where they're at instead of broad stroke solutions. I think that is another thing. Because we didn't have enough data and information, from what I've seen living in HR, we've applied broad stroke solutions to everybody. Everyone has to fit in a box, you know?
Yes.
Let's build a competency framework. Let's build a job description. Everything is tied to those core tight sandboxes. And the reality that we are living today, Rachel, as you pointed out, is unknown. It's fluid. It's dynamic. Those things won't apply in this context. And data helps us customize and tailor our solutions.
Love this. I'm already thinking about how all the marketing people are talking about, what's your ideal client profile and what's the avatar of this or of that. And really thinking about that from an employee perspective. I never thought about this before. I've got some things to think about. This is exciting.
Yeah, I mean, if
Yeah.
you look at it from the perspective of supporting employees, a marketing team is there to support behavior change in customers. HR and all the different sub practices in HR is there to support employee behaviors. At the end of the day, it's still about behavior change.
Yes. And it's people.
Yeah,
Now flip it also on, you know, not just the data that you have, but auditing your processes for data enablement, for AI readiness, just where tech is already being used to amplify, amazing. You also kind of have to look at it though for where is tech maybe eroding trust or transparency or I, I mean, just having the knowledge of more of this, less of that. Ooh,
yeah,
this is working, that isn't. And doubling down on really determining what is the differentiators between your employees who are thriving during these times of change and your employees who are struggling. And it could be for a gazillion different reasons. You shouldn't assume that you know.
yeah,
And I think a lot of leaders assume that they know why someone isn't getting on board with a transformation. And I've just seen it proven time and 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 time again that that's not the case. You can't assume. It's like we need mass. We need customization in mass. We need to be able to scale how we customize things to individual employees and employee populations.
yeah, yeah. And that's a great way for us to not fear technology, but if we automate ourselves, most of our work that we do in HR and lean on data and automation to give us those rich insights, what you highlighted is such a nice swim lane for HR to play in, where they're leveraging the power of data and automation to free up capacity and to get insights to coach the business around those pain points, around making right decisions when it comes to humans.
Yes.
And of course, being transparent with employees around where, when, and how AI and automation is used to make decisions and informed choices. So, one of the things that I want to double down on with you based on this data conversation and automation is also the impact that we are hearing on organizations, because I mean, we're hearing it in news every single day that companies are letting go of employees and whatnot. And I feel like middle management is a layer that will and might shrink, because if the role of middle management is just delegation of tasks and making sure work gets done, if that's what middle management is doing in an organization, that particular work is ripe for automation and AI to come in and do that job. So if we hollow out that middle manager role with automation, who carries the culture and coaching forward for the rest of the organization?
I'm not sure I agree with you. I think that middle managers, there may be fewer, but I do believe that they are the culture carriers. I think we need to give them the tools to spend less time in the spreadsheets, pulling the data, assigning the tasks, following up on checking the box. Did it get done? Did it not? And spending more time being a connector, more time, coaching, translating strategy, building trust, actually managing humans.
Yeah.
I think that's the only way, or the only way that I can think about right now, where you're constantly pairing tech with human, and you reinvest that time in the humans, in mentoring, in client care, in employee care, in just feedback.
Yeah.
And this doesn't exactly answer your question, but I feel like the managers still are, there is such an important role for them to play, to bridge between just what the strategy is and what the day to day is. And we've got to figure that out.
But at the same time, what we hear, Rachel, is that when we are promoting people, we typically don't always go with promoting somebody who's really good at people leadership. We
Absolutely.
start because there is no other career path for organizations sometimes but for as a retention tactic. And also from an employee's perspective, we feel like when we get the next title, we feel like we are making progress because organizations haven't shown us other ways of rewarding progress. So we might in middle management sometimes have people who might not be the best fit to translate that culture, to translate that vision for the organization. So there lies an opportunity again with data in place for organizations to understand who is in the middle management or broadly even in leadership seat, and are they the best fit for the work that needs to be done going forward, because the day-to-day tactical stuff can now be delegated to machines.
So, from my perspective, I think you're spot on. We do not invest nationally. I can't speak to the globe, but we do not invest enough in our managers. We have the Peter Principle that takes place in so many organizations. We have folks who being people leaders is not their strength, or they've never been taught, coached, guided to make it their strength. And that's where we're going to likely see the funnel come down on your total number of managers, because I can see a world where we get back to where somebody's job really is to manage human beings, not that that's a very small part of their job, which is what it actually is in many organizations today, but where that is the big part of their job. And so doubling down on what I call power skills, they are not soft skills. They are powerful. They make the difference in leaders. Things like empathy, compassion, emotional intelligence, delegation, communication, resiliency, the ability to give feedback, have difficult conversations. That's what separates great people managers from poor people managers. So let's double down there. Just, I'm going to use my son as an example. He recently graduated. He is in a management training program, and they're spending a significant amount of time focused on people skills because he is working for one of those organizations that we read about every single day, and their robots and their AI and their technology, and they are taking a population of their young junior level employees and really investing in those power skills, in those people skills, almost as much, if not more, actually, than they're investing in their technical skills right now. So it will be very interesting to see how this next generation, we don't even have to wait for them, but like, talk to me in 6 months. Let's see what this looks like. It's a whole new ballgame.
So let's imagine a future where the middle management layer still exists, and to your point, we might not need as many people in middle management as we do today. But whoever we need is now fully augmented with AI and have the right data and insights at their fingertips. There's automation that's working to help free up their time so that they can invest in coaching and guiding their teams. This takes immense amount of trust within their teams. So how would you suggest, and again, there's no like right or wrong answer because we are still kind of shaping how we get into this future, but from your perspective, how do we build that trust and fairness into people's strategy when we know that AI can be opaque?
It's a great question. I don't think we have all of the answers for the future yet. But if you look to the past, I think it's being real about being curious and asking tough questions and being prepared with the answers and being transparent about here's what the data shows us. Here's what we think that this data means. And here's the decisions that we're making as a result of it. Hopefully, if at X period down the road, you realize that you made a mistake in how it was interpreted or implemented, the changes as a result of the data, that you own that also, that you say, we are on a new path and there's things that we've learned and we need to tweak and reset, and we're going to do that because this is new. And I hope that we still will, as humans, give each other a little bit of grace, that we're learning lots of new things, that we recognize that, you know, sometimes we interpret the data incorrectly. Sometimes the data may actually not be all that accurate, or we thought we were asking one question and we got certain answers, and whether it's truly an AI hallucination or you just didn't ask the question that clearly. I think that there's
Mhm.
a lot of opportunities to just, by calling out and saying what you're doing, being transparent about it, walking through the steps and owning what works and celebrating that, and owning what doesn't work and pivoting, but being clear about it. I think that's the only way that you can build trust. I haven't learned any other ways yet. Um,
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're spot on. Transparency is one of the key foundations for organizations at all levels to have as they integrate AI and use AI to make people decisions. Having said that, from people who you're talking to, clients that you're working with, and whatever observations you're having in the industry, are you seeing organizations operate with trust? And if not, from your perspective, what would be the reason why companies are hesitating to be open and transparent and have that two-way dialogue that, yes, we used AI to make that decision, and be open to challenging whatever choice or decision they made from the other person's perspective as well, and coming up with a better answer overall or better choice overall.
So, in comparison to what you see in the news of, larger organizations, or how did XYZ organization make the determination to lay off X number of people and they selected this population, blah, 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 blah. Personally, I'm not working with any clients that are even remotely at that level. I think that the news media is turning something that is not happening ubiquitously across most organizations. It's just not happening like that in my small and mid-sized business world. Even my colleagues, former colleagues who work at very large organizations, they're dipping their toes in the water. They're not, they're not yet truly they're using it as a data point, but humans are still making those final decisions.
But at the same time, we hear news items. I'm not going to name the company. I'm sure people listening can guess which company I'm talking about. They come out and say that we are going to let go of all employees who we think are not ready to be trained into the AI world. How do you make that determination? How do you know whether somebody is going to be, like somebody who you can upskill, reskill for the AI world or not?
I don't know how they're doing it. I mean, it sounds to me like a bunch of engineers and a bunch of tech folks and a bunch of programmers have created a formula, and their people leaders and their people and culture or HR teams don't have a big enough seat at the table to be having those dialogues. And their attorneys are probably saying, this is legally defensible because we've checked this box and checked that box, and we had a straight formula, and nobody can prove whether their formula is accurate or not. So I'm not saying that people are necessarily doing it, with malintent or any of these things, but they're looking at it from a purely financial sense. And let's talk about it in 3 months when they're rehiring people because, oops, we made this mistake and those mistakes, and oops, we let go this entire department, and oops, 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 oops.
And we have seen examples
And
of.
we have so many examples of that. So, like, I'm not trying to be an ostrich with my head in the sand. I'm trying to stay in front of all of this. I'm trying to think about what the future will look like. And I think we've got a long way to go. I think that technology always has been, always will be, always should be a critical component, but it's not the only data point. It should be like, I don't know, what's that expression? Like the wind in your sails or something. AI should be the wind at your back, pushing you forward, but it shouldn't be like weighing you down. I mean, we want to be unbiased. I'm not convinced that our AI is unbiased yet, because as humans are developing it, creating these formulas, creating, these prompts, we all have our own biases as well. So, like, we got a ways to go, Shveta. A real
I hear you.
We got a
Yep,
ways to go.
absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. that framing of wind in the sails, and we still need somebody to steer the ship. Let not the wind take you wherever it wants to take you.
Yeah.
All right. So, as we wrap up our conversation, Rachel, what would be 2 to 3 practical actions that leaders can take to evolve their people strategy today so that companies don't come out with announcements like what I was sharing with you earlier, so that we are more prepared and we know what we are talking about?
I mean, I think your investments at this point need to be in those power skills. Certainly, you need the tech skills. And we were talking about our HR professionals building their tech literacy. I think for our tech folks or the rest of the employee population, we need to be building those power skills, those things that it's hard to imagine a level of authenticity, empathy, compassion coming from your AI. Although mine says, wow, what a great idea, Rachel. And I'm like, could you stop that BS in there? Like, don't feed me that. But I really do believe doubling down, if I was a leader, doubling down on those power skills, communication skills is critical. I think investing and being clear that you are investing in people's professional development at the same time that you are investing in technology and AI is so important for folks to understand. And being honest in your immediate and specific feedback that you're giving someone, and also being honest about the long-term feedback. Um, those those are the things that don't actually cost that much, but prove that you're a good human and build the trust, the loyalty that your organization has a misstep or two as you are going through this transformational journey, that you still have some trust in the bank, if you will. Those are the things that I would really focus on. Focus on being human so that the technology can do the technology.
This is the Great People Strategy Reset. And it's not about replacing people, like you said, it's about redesigning how people and technology thrive together. Thank you so much for your time today, Rachel.
Thank you. It has been an eye-opening and mind-blowing experience. I have so much to think about after this meeting.
Likewise, likewise. And I love the authenticity with which you shared the information with us and made us think about how we need to think differently when it comes to people strategy. Thank you. And I'm going to tap your shoulder in 3 months and we will continue the conversation.
Sounds amazing. Can't wait.
And to our listeners, thanks for listening to Tides. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a colleague who's rethinking their own people strategy.